Hello, everybody, and welcome to our webinar on how to take your business global. Now, before we get started, a few little housekeeping points. Feel free to post questions as we talk, and one of our moderators will gather those up, and they may present them to us live if it's appropriate, or we'll store them up at the end and we'll create a questions and answers. So as questions pop up, please put them in the chat. We'd love this to be interactive. So, in terms of introductions, then, I'm Andrew Fay. I'm the CEO of the Bryce Group. I've been here now just around a year and a half, but I've spent all of my career in outsourced professional services. So, across accounting, tax, HR, legal, financial services, HR, and payroll. Initially in the UK, but then internationally. And I have experience as well in buying and selling businesses, both in the UK and internationally, including merging my business with a US firm, where I then stayed on and worked on their global leadership team for about 2.5 years. So hopefully lots of useful experience that we can draw on today and on running a business in multiple countries, and how we can help impart some of that knowledge to you. And I'd like to introduce you to Gemma Bignell.
Hi, I'm Gemma Bignell. I'm the Corporate Services Director at Briars Group. I've been with Briars for now 19 years. I'm a qualified accountant and I specialise in helping businesses to expand appropriately, think about what they need to be doing and specialising in just taking those bits forward for them.
Okay, so before we get going, a little bit of a background on Briars. So who are we? Well, really simplistically, we provide a whole host of outsourced professional services to businesses that want to either scale locally in their own domestic region or expand globally. And we've been doing this now for over 30 years. And we initially started off as a tax consultancy business, but then as our clients got more diverse and their needs changed, so did our product set. And we'll touch on that a little bit later on, but we provide a whole plethora of outsourced professional services. And the way we deal with clients, there are three things that are absolutely non-negotiable to us. So the first is how fanatical we are about client experience. If you're going to trust us to be your partner to help you take your business into different geographies, then we appreciate that we have to represent your business. The second is to be guardians of culture. And we don't just mean our culture, but again, if we're an outsourced division of your business, we understand that it's really important that we align ourselves with your business culture as well. And then the third thing is we're trailblazers. So how can we make your business better by the way we think about problems, and we look to unblock issues to just add real value on a day-to-day basis into your business. And so where do we sit in the market? Well, we're not one of the big four, so we're not a huge global consultancy business, but we're equally not just a global EOR provider as well. We sit somewhere in the middle, a whole plethora of outsourced professional services delivered by a blend of people and technology, where we really get to know your business and embed ourselves in your business as an extension to both your leadership team and your operational team as well. So I said earlier on that we provide a whole host of professional services. I don't plan to go into all of these in details, but it just gives you an overview of how we break our world up into the corporate services, the accounting services, and how we can help businesses look after all those statutory responsibilities and the finance elements. How we can payroll workers across a whole plethora of different ways, whether that's employed, self-employed, engaged, whether it's through an intermediary. Our HR services, we help you with your strategy and workforce planning, and then we help you engage this modern eclectic workforce today, help you maximize use of the global professional workforce, IC verification. So all of these services work together to really give you this sort of complete outsourced professional service. And finally, the last little bit, we've helped over 3,000 businesses now expand globally. And that's been into over 150 different countries, providing over 25 different types of professional outsourced services. And what we do is we give it one great point of contact for every one of our clients. So even though the delivery might be really complicated, might be fragmented, might be separated over multiple countries, you know that you have one person that you can go to help with your strategy, operational delivery, and support as you take your business global. Okay, so if that's a little bit of background on Gemma and myself, a little bit of background on the business, so why we feel confident to be able to help you with this webinar today. So what are we going to talk about? Well, firstly, we're going to talk about why global expansion as a strategic narrative for your business is now a must. What are the events that trigger global expansion as business leaders or leadership teams? Where do you start when you start to think about how to take your business into a different geography? What are the different options and ways you can do that? And for each of those options, what are the risks and pitfalls? We're going to give you some success stories of businesses we've helped, and hopefully by that time, you've submitted a whole host of questions that we've collated, and we can be able to go through those as well. Perfect. Okay, so let's look at the macro dynamics here then. So why is global expansion now a necessity for any business? And perhaps pre-COVID, we'd all be forgiven for thinking that global expansion was reserved for large blue chip corporate businesses. So the biggest corporate businesses they're the ones that move into different geographies. And what happened in COVID is that we all got used to working and operating in a very different way, in a remote way, in an agile way. Technology then supercharged and empowered us, which has now created this great global flexible workforce. And what that means is businesses now can look for talent, not just within the commuter belt, but anywhere in the world. And that then started this chain reaction of businesses of all shapes and sizes, either through necessity or potentially competitive threat, thinking about, wow, I've now got an opportunity to take my business global. And we can see that through some data points. So the Harvard Business Review talks about that businesses that have a global expansion strategy tend to grow over 1.5 times faster than the competitors who are staying in their local region. And of those businesses that then take on this exciting challenge of going global, over 70% of them increase that revenue in year one. And now, if you think about when we all started our business, everybody knows the stat over 50% of businesses fail in their first year. Well, you can see this is significantly stronger because you already know how to run your business and how to sell the product and how to sell the service. You just now need to learn how to take that to a different geographical market. And then finally, when we sort of come to the other dynamics that are going on in the world, over 95% of our target addressable market globally sit outside the UK and the US. And that's quite a surprising stat. If you want to get access, we will be limiting 95% of potential consumers if we don't have a global expansion plan that considers a world outside of the UK and US. So there's a whole host of macro forces that are now pushing us as leaders to think about, okay, the world's moving around me, talent, opportunities, different people that are moving. Should I be taking my business global? So what are those events then that happen more locally? If that's the macro things that could happen, what could happen locally to your business? Well, you might take on professional investments. More probably around a private equity type investment where a business invests in you and they're looking to get an appropriate return of over sort of 5 maybe to 7 year window. So in addition to, can you consolidate your marketplace? Can you potentially buy other businesses? There will also be, can you sell more things to more people? And that more things to more people will be moving into different geographies. So your strategy might be changed by you taking external investments into your business. And you need to be ready for that and understand that, because these investors now will be far more used to that being commonplace and will expect businesses to be able to take that strategy and implement it. You could buy a business, or you could be bought and merge with another business that either has an overseas entity already, or is potentially the business is overseas itself. So Your sort of M&A strategy might bring global expansion to the table, where you need to understand how to do this. What are the risks? What are the compliance issues? How to make sure it doesn't suck you into a vortex and still allow you to run that business. And then actually, it may be something that you don't do. It might be something that your competitors do. So they start moving into different territories. They start to sell their products and services into different regions. So you now have a competitive threat and you have to play catch up. And so you have to react to this. And so that brings a global expansion strategy into your boardroom. Or you're the person that instigates it. You spot a new market opportunity. You spot potentially a region or a products and service, and you want to capitalize on that and drive your business forward. And then finally, and we touched on this already, it's talent. You are most likely to start your global expansion journey by actually engaging a worker that doesn't work or doesn't live or doesn't want to be paid in the country where you're based, because this global movement since the COVID pandemic, it now is creating this great flexible world where we can get access to talent internationally. Okay, so if there's macro dynamics that are saying we should consider a global expansion strategy, there are local dynamics that affect us on a day-to-day basis, which make us think about global expansion strategy. So once all those things happen, where should we start? Well, Gemma and I have helped a whole host of businesses, and Gemma will give some great examples in a second. But I guess this sounds really basic, but you'll see from lots of those local reasons that businesses think about global expansion. Sometimes when it's done to you, maybe you haven't thought through the detail quite as much as you potentially should. So the first thing we do is we look at what's the strategic rationale. Why are you looking to consider expanding globally? Is it for one of those macro reasons that we talked about? Is it for one of those local reasons? And when we understand that, and you understand that, and everybody buys into that as a leadership team, then performing a SWOT analysis. So what are the strengths of your organization in completing that? Where are your weaknesses? Has anybody ever done this before? Does anybody have experience of the local compliance regulations? What are the opportunities and the threats? And do those opportunities outweigh those threats? And so you've got a plan, and then you've assessed yourself against your ability to deliver that plan. And usually what comes out, and it's no surprise, but that's the biggest threat really in a SWOT analysis, is you just don't have the capacity to be able to do this. And why would you? Why would you have resource sat on the bench that are experts in delivering in multiple countries just in case that strategy ever came along? So it's understandable, but don't sort of underestimate the overhead that comes with this. So seriously considering and understanding the capacity planning that comes with taking your business global is a really important step. And then as part of that, that doesn't necessarily always mean you have to then hire those individuals. You can engage specialist businesses, Briars being one of them. There are lots of other businesses and lots of other different verticals that will be able to help you. And you'll be able to engage fractional solutions, so independent contractors and workers that you can bring in on a sort of subscription basis for a period of time to help you with this. So when you sit down with any business and they start with, I think we want to take our business global, some form of this logical step is what we take our clients through. So Gemma, if I hand over to you now to talk about some of the different ways businesses can do this.
Yeah, so there's obviously a lot of options available when you're looking to expand globally. We're going to go into a bit more detail around each of those options and what they have pros and cons as to each of them. But clearly, when we're assessing your strategy, we're thinking about which of those options is going to be the right one for you. And it's horses for courses. It's not one size fits all. So we will always start at that point and take you through. So I am going to go through entity, NRER. There's a lot of acronyms here. So we'll obviously give a bit more explanation as we come on to those individually. So we'll start with the entity. So most people think that when they've got to expand globally, that they must create an entity. Clearly, in some instances, that is the right option, but with that comes, various compliance issues, a bit more cost, a lot more thought process with regards to the tax side of things and how that might implode on your parent company. So we're looking at, market research, whether or not that would be something you need to actually do. When you're looking for the talent pools, what would you need to actually have in that particular jurisdiction? Do you need to have an entity? So from a taxable presence point of view. And then kind of what the ongoing management looks like. Will it be something you control from the parent company, or will you need specialists in those countries in order to ensure that that entity is set up and compliant as we go through? An NRER, so non-resident employer registration, it's more of a payroll registration only. So if you're not creating a taxable presence, if the people that you're going to be hiring don't incur a taxable presence for your organisation, you can actually do it on a much simpler basis. So it's less overheads. There are still the employer regulations, so there's still compliance that comes with that. But from a organisational structure point of view, it's much more simplistic. The non-resident entity is actually, maybe the UK, for example. If you're going into France, you can have that payroll registration reported through the UK entity. So it kind of gives you that culture still, because they're part of your organisation, but it's something that you don't need to have that full compliance of an entity set up there. Employer of record, or EOR. So this is an option where we tend to look at it more of a try before you buy. So you're looking at a particular jurisdiction, you're not really sure if it's right for you, whether or not it's going to be working. Maybe you've looked at some of those macro threats and you're thinking about the competitive side of things. So you want to try it, but you don't really want to do the NRER. You definitely don't want to do an entity because of the compliance regulations. So you can have a third party employ those individuals on your behalf. That means that all of those benefits that you have to provide in those jurisdictions can be provided through the third party. So again, you're reducing your regulation, but actually it enables you to employ that individual and manage them, but just through that third party. So it's a great way, as I say, of trying before you buy. The risk mitigation for the entity, your entity, is far lower when you're using an employer of record. You just need to be aware of that taxable presence risk. And then we have an agent of record. So kind of similar, but with regards to contractors where you need them to be paid in a particular jurisdiction. There might be withholding tax that you're, don't really want to take on that compliance side of things. You can have an agent of record that will deal with all of that for you. Again, it's a bit more of a try before you buy. It might be a short-term project that you're thinking, I need to do this. I think a lot of people, when they're expecting to expand overseas, think that they just have to do an entity. And clearly, we're showing that there are lots of different options, lots of different ways of doing this. And it doesn't have to be that initial entity route, which comes with it an awful lot of compliance risks. With regards to the agent of record and the employer of record, they enable that, try before you buy, at least test the market, see whether it is right for you before you commit those capital funds and your time in order to do the actual entity, if that's the route you need to then go. And then we have PEO. So PEO is very similar to EOR, more found in the US market. It's a shared employment. So there are two employers actually organising the employment of one individual. So it's a shared responsibility. But again, it means that the benefits that you have to provide to those employees are split. You don't have that full compliance requirement. And all of those benefits that you kind of need to be putting through, they're much more easily shared when it's on an economies of scale basis, which if you're going into a jurisdiction, you only have one or two people, actually trying to provide those benefits in those entities is very, very difficult in those jurisdictions. So we tend to see that actually where there's small employee numbers, some of these other routes are far more beneficial to those. So when we come into the risks and pitfalls of global expansion, there's obviously a lot of experience that Andrew and I have both had, and we have seen an awful lot of things go right, things go wrong, individuals that have turned up in country thinking they can just move there and start up. Clearly that can't happen. And as Andrew said, you don't expect to have that capacity sat on a bench ready to go. So you might have inexperienced leadership. We don't all know everything, and actually that's not usually what your team has been employed to do. So calling on those fractional resources, calling on experts to be able to say, actually, we've seen this before, and or actually, if you thought about doing it this way, those sorts of things can be really crucial. One of the biggest ones that we've seen is the cultural integration. So when you're sending individuals or you're employing in different countries, you can't just apply the rules and regulations that you're used to in, say, the UK or the US. They're very different, and how you treat people and how you, the languages you use, all of those things mean such different points in different jurisdictions. And of course, without experts, you're not going to necessarily know those parts, and it's very easy to fall foul. The transfer pricing is something that a lot of companies have limited experience of, but there are different ways of doing it. And obviously, when you're putting a company into a new jurisdiction, it's the way that the corporates there or the governments actually get their revenue. So there has to be something coming through as revenue or sales in those jurisdictions. Transfer pricing looks at those arm's length transactions, putting that in place. And if you don't necessarily understand that, you can easily fall foul of the government agencies with them looking at it saying, actually, no, you do owe us some tax. You just need to be thinking about those parts. The permanent establishment risk is what we were talking about with the taxable presence. So do you have to have an entity? Have you triggered those parts for any of the jurisdictions that you're in, where they're looking at it saying, no, actually this needs to be an entity, or no, you're going to trigger some other compliance requirements in those jurisdictions. Those are things that you won't necessarily have the experience of within your team. But clearly, with a little bit of guidance and a little bit of help, we can overcome those together.
And then the only other one, Gemma, which sort of talks, which is the sort of the summation of everything we talked about today. Every single business is different. Every expansion strategy is different.
Massively.
Every attitude to risk, every corporate and government regulatory framework is different. Take the time to understand what works for you rather than what the most common marketing messages are. There are huge organizations in the global expansion space, and their marketing budgets will let you believe that it's all plug and play and really simple. And in some instances, it can be. In many, it isn't, and it doesn't always mean it's right for you as well. So take the time to make sure that the advice is tailored to you.
I couldn't agree more. We have so many clients that come to us and say, I really need EOR. But actually, when you get into it, they don't. There's actually a far more strategic benefit of them doing one of the other options and not just taking that EOR route, which is clearly quite a buzzword at the moment. So as we come into one of our success stories, so PubNub have been with us for many years, and we have taken them literally from through every life stage of their journey of expansion, covering EOR, entity creation, different jurisdictions. So we've got Estonia, we've got Poland, the UK, India, Singapore, and we have helped them go through each of those journey stages and actually some of the transitions through from where they were originally EOR in the UK and then actually into a full entity creation, and now supporting them with their audits and all of their compliance around that UK entity. So it's a really nice story for us to go through and say, actually, they wanted to expand, they came to us, we were able to help them with each of those life cycle changes and stages for them.
Okay, so I appreciate there's a whole lot of information there, and I imagine that people on the call, I can see some questions coming through. I'm sure we've collated those in a second, and probably start there thinking, it just feels too hard. I'm going to put it up tomorrow. I don't really know where to start. And one of the services that we provide is a solution to help you assess if you're ready for this. It helps understand what we talked about before. So what's the strategic rationale behind this? We look at the product fit and market fit. We help you assess your business model. We look at your operational capacity and technology infrastructure. We help you understand the compliance and regulatory frameworks that you're going to be working in and across. We help you understand the cost dynamic and the cash flow implications of doing this. We highlight where there's going to be cultural issues and can help you plot your talent strategy to making sure you've got the best people, whether they're employed, self-employed, or engaged through a support business. And we can help you sort of test the market as well. And so if at the end of this people say, actually, I am really interested, but I don't know where to start, this is just something we'd love to speak to you about. We can help with a global expansion readiness assessment. Okay, surprise time. Okay, Gemma, I think we covered the first one, but why not just an EOR if I have a go and then you technically correct me on that? So I've actually been on the board of a global EOR provider for a number of years, and so probably best I can answer this from experience. So why an EOR? Really easy solution to engage a worker in a different country and allow that business to be the employer and to take on that responsibility of payrolling that worker and complying with all the local regulations. So that's the why. Why not? So as Jem said before, sometimes certain types of workers doing certain jobs can trigger a taxable presence. So you may think that the benefits of the EOR applies, but it doesn't. And that's nothing to do with the EOR, that's to do with the local framework, the local regulations that govern how taxable presence is sort of calculated. It could be down to your strategy that you actually want to be the next virgin of your industry, and you want to have a badge on every product and a flag in every country. And so an EOR doesn't give you that. It doesn't give you that local presence. It doesn't give you the sort of the land and expand. It doesn't allow you to pay into the local tax schemes, which might be important for your strategy. And in some countries as well, it's not recognised. Now, that doesn't mean there aren't other ways of having intermediaries to employ workers, but I guess they're three of the reasons at the top of my head, Gemma. I don't know if there's any more you want to add to those.
I think the only one I would really add is the fact that as an EOR employee, they're not employed by you. So that can actually have quite a big cultural impact on your business, because the individuals could be seen as outsiders. They could feel like it if they're not treated the same, if they don't necessarily have the same benefits. It's just considerations when you're thinking about going EOR route even.
Okay. I assume this means it doesn't mean private equity.
No, it's permanent establishment. I'm hoping.
do you want to have a go at that one, Gemma?
Yeah, so how far can the permanent establishment risk go back? So this is the taxable presence risk. And that is really how long is a piece of string. Depending on which jurisdiction you're in, how long you've been trading for, they will go back as far as they potentially can. There isn't really a caveat on actually there's a line in the sand at this point. Obviously, you can do your best to mitigate that risk, and with the right advice and the right strategy, that wouldn't be an issue. But yeah, it is to be aware that the fact that actually that could go back quite some time.
Okay. No, thanks, Gemma. And then finally, how can Briars help with my growth plans? So I think we've touched on a few things. We can help with your readiness assessment. We can help with sort of testing, validating, and building your strategy. We can help think through the plans. We can help mobilize and operationalize them. We can be the operational delivery teams. We can our services more through your journey. So I guess it's not meant to be too sales focused this. So if anybody wants to understand more, please feel free to reach out to us after. But I guess all of it would be the answer to that question. Okay, so things that we covered today, the key takeaways. The world's moving really fast around you. So having this on your to-do list for 3 to 5 years to be the sizzle to sell to somebody else when the next investor comes in might not be an option. It might get taken away from you now. It is far more commonplace for businesses to trade internationally than ever before. There are a whole host of triggers that can drive this that might be done to you that you don't do, whether that's you buy somebody's bought, your competitor moves, as a new sort of change in regulation. So understanding what to do. So in case one of those local variables move, you can act accordingly. And it's not as easy as sometimes people might make you think. It can be in certain instances if you want to do certain things and payroll a worker for a shorter period of time, but actually really taking time to understand your strategy, the right solution to underpin that strategy, the right support structure that you need, really important. And I guess that how can Briars help? I guess all of that, as we said, we'd love to speak to any business that's sat there that's either about to start on that journey or already has and maybe needs some support as well. Okay, well, thank you so much. Appreciating these things. Sometimes people find it a little awkward and a little difficult to ask questions. If you're one of those, contact details here, please feel to reach out and ask questions. I think what we're going to do is record this and also send you a copy of it as well. So if when you watch the rerun, you suddenly have a question, we'd love to hear from you then. But thank you so much for your time, Gemma. Thank you so much for your knowledge,
Thank you.
experience, and imparting that as usual. And we look forward to seeing you in the next instalment and webinar that we put on. Thank you very much.